New week means new Kuminga reports. Yes, you're watching Golden State Warriors Today by Chat Sports. I am your host, Tyler Smith, and the Jonathan Kuminga free agent saga continues as both sides, Kuminga and his representation and the Golden State Warriors, continue to slowly reveal more and more about what their hands look like and their decisions that they're probably going to land on as it gets closer and closer to that qualifying offer deadline on October 1st. And that is the doomsday scenario that Kuminga and his side have been threatening over the last few weeks, accepting the $7.9 million qualifying offer, which essentially is a one-year deal that lets Kuminga enter unrestricted free agency next offseason and carries with it a no-trade clause, giving him full control over his future for the next 365 days and beyond. So where does Golden State and Kuminga basically sit at this point, with Kuminga kind of threatening this and Golden State still having their 2-year $45 million offer on the table? Here's what Anthony Slater had to report in his latest free agency write-up. He said, "So everything sits in the same spot it did 10 days ago. The Warriors have not upped their offer, and Kuminga has indicated to those close to him that the $7.9 million qualifying offer is more appealing to him than the Warriors' current pitch. Something has to give before the October 1st deadline." This is not good. This is not good news for Golden State Warriors fans, not good news for the front office. They're getting a little bit of pressure put on them now by Jonathan Kuminga and his reps. Now, if this is the case, if Kuminga is dead serious about accepting the qualifying offer, well, Golden State is going to have to budge. It looks like they're going to be in a spot where they can't afford to not have a tradable asset on the roster, but not also have that tradable asset be worth $20 million that they're looking to sign him to next season, so they can get a big chunk of, competitive players, competitive salaries back in the deal, back in the return, to help them in their pursuits of a playoff run and a championship run for Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond. So Golden State's going to have to move on whatever they're thinking about right now, or they're going to have to adjust their offer in some capacity so Kuminga gets more enticed to accept it. And there isn't a super awkward situation when he does return to the roster, because all signs point to that being the case right now. Whether he signs a qualifying offer or they get a rework deal done, Kuminga's going to be on the roster. So it's best for both sides if they try to make it as little awkwardness as possible. With that being said, before we get into more on this big-time report about Kuminga, predict it for me down in the comment section. What will happen? It's crystal ball time. Look in there, shake it up, and you guys let me know what you see coming down the pipeline. Is Kuminga going to sign the qualifying offer? Will Golden State be stubborn enough to let that happen? Or are they going to rework their deal that they have on the table right now, get closer to a little bit more of guaranteed money, and then both sides will be a little bit more happy than they are right now? Look, my take is that Joe Lacob will not allow it to get to that point. What has been the stance from Lacob up to this point? Well, it has been that he believes that Kuminga is an all-star level player, somebody that he values very, very highly, and somebody that he thinks that, to this point, no team has offered enough that makes it worth giving him up in a trade this offseason. So that tells me that Joe Lacob's not going to want to give him up for quite literally nothing next offseason, and that is what would happen if he signed the $7.9 million qualifying offer. So Lacob has got to, I'm sure, get Dunleavy, Kerr, all these guys back in the good graces of Jonathan Kuminga and get closer to what Kuminga wants. It's not going to be that 3-year, $82 million deal that he and his agency have kind of proposed to Golden State, but it is going to be something a little bit more, at least in the guarantees department, on that 2-year, $45 million offer. Now, there has been no real traction or no real movement on this whole scenario because Kuminga hasn't really been present for it all. He hasn't even been in the States whatsoever. He's actually been playing in Afrobasket in some exhibition matchups for the Republic of the Congo, and he actually ended up tweeting out how thankful he was to represent his country and all that stuff. But now, amidst the contract negotiations and the standstill that they're still in, well, the Republic of the Congo released their final roster for the Afrobasket competition overseas, and if you look, I don't see Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga's not on this list at all. So that tells me he's going to be back in the United States. He's going to be back working in Miami, and that's where he's at this point, getting his offseason development in. So if this is your first time watching one of these videos, if this is your first time kind of getting all the details behind where the Golden State Warriors and Jonathan Kuminga are at and why this has taken so long to come to an agreement of any sort, between the two sides, well, I'll give you guys the backstory and then where we kind of are at this point in time. The backstory starts with Kuminga and his own mindset. He views himself as a multiple-time All-Star. He views himself as a franchise building block, somebody that you build around and really make a focal point of your team, your scoring department, and everything that Kuminga does well on the basketball court. Well, Kuminga ended up suffering an injury as he got kind of more of that role early on this season. Back in December, Kuminga was putting up multiple 30-point games and all that stuff, and you could see him elevating himself in this Warriors rotation, and then he went down with a sprained ankle on January 4th and ended up keeping him out for over 2 months after the injury happened. And the Warriors, in the process, traded for Jimmy Butler at the February trade deadline. There were talks about them including Jonathan Kuminga in a trade to send him to Phoenix to acquire Kevin Durant, but Durant shot all those things down. They settled for Jimmy, and then ended up being a pretty solid addition. But Kuminga, when he was headed back into rotation, it was not as pretty. He really struggled to fit next to Jimmy Butler, who's not as much of a floor spacer, and Draymond Green, who's not as much of a floor spacer. Obviously, Curry being out there can only do so much, and teams were just selling out for him when they realized they didn't have to guard anybody else out there on the perimeter. That eventually led to him being benched, and late in the regular season, he looked off of Steph Curry during multiple possessions during their penultimate game against the Portland Trailblazers. That caused Steve Kerr to DNP him for their final game of the regular season, the play-in game against Memphis, and the entire first round, essentially, against the Houston Rockets. Now, he really had no choice but to put Kuminga back in the lineup when Steph Curry had gotten hurt in Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals against the Timberwolves. Kuminga re-enters the rotation after Steph goes down, and let's be honest, he put up pretty monster numbers. But Golden State was not really competitive in a lot of those games, and they didn't end up winning any of the 4 that Kuminga played an entire game rotation for. And for that reason, all the inconsistency in Kuminga's role in Golden State, the rocky relationship with Steve Kerr, that's led him and his representation to want to play elsewhere. Naturally, he's not getting the role that he wants in Golden State. He doesn't really want to play there anymore if he's not going to see that in the near future. So he and his team have been looking for a sign and trade basically this entire time as the offseason has kind of come into full gear and free agency has begun. They've been holding out hope that a sign and trade will end up coming on the horizon, but it doesn't look all likely at this point. The Heat, the Bulls, the Kings, and the Suns have been the 4 teams that we've seen have really any level of interest this offseason in Kuminga, in bringing him in. But what we know is about this free agency cycle, a ton of teams, basically every team, does not have any money to go out there and sign Kuminga at all. So they'd have to craft sign and trade packages in order to do so. And there's even more crazy nonsense and hoops you got to jump through when it comes to signing and trading Jonathan Kuminga because of his base year compensation and the Golden State Warriors being able to only take back 50% of what Kuminga makes in the first-year deal. Very complicated, but it's not just an easy salary match it up to whatever Kuminga gets on his new contract. The Heat went out and traded for Norman Powell, so cross them out. The Bulls traded for Isaac Okoro, and then they drafted Noah Senge. You can basically cross them out. The Kings, they have the most interest. They've been offering him something in the realm of 4 years, $90 million, but they haven't been willing to give up any of their young talent like Keon Ellis or Keegan Murray. And Malik Monk would just cause too many problems for Golden State on the other end. And then the Suns, they just have a garbage array of assets that Golden State wants nothing to do with. So to this point, those teams have been throwing out offers, but it's been nothing that Golden State has remotely been interested in to this point to where they can even kind of negotiate and work out the kinks of a deal. So where we're at right now, all those sign and trade discussions have been cut off. Finito, gonzo, they're in fairy dust. We'll see you later. They're not talking to any teams about moving Kuminga at this point. All signs point to him being on the Warriors roster to start next season. How that's going to go down, though, we have no idea, as the Warriors do have that 2-year, $45 million deal left on the table. 1+1, though. It's not really a 2-year, $45 million deal. It's a 1-year, $21 million deal with a team option in the second year, no guaranteed money. And with that kind of contract, Kuminga would also command a no-trade clause similar to the qualifying offer, and the Warriors are not budging on this deal. The only way that they actually end up signing their end of it, though, is if Kuminga waives that no-trade clause in that contract offer, which is the big holdup of this whole thing. Kuminga does not want to be traded mid-season, so he's not looking to waive that no-trade clause that comes with the 2-year, the 1+1 team option deal. So we're in a standstill at this point, a complete stalemate. And now, like I said at the beginning of today's video, the Kuminga representation is threatening and using the $7.9 million qualifying offer as a threat to Golden State. So that is where we are at right now. That's been all that has been reported from the beginning to today, August 11th. Now, as far as the $7.9 million qualifying offer goes, I know that's doomsday for Golden State. Like, they cannot afford to not have Kuminga as a tradable asset and cannot afford to not have him as a $20 million tradable asset. But on the flip side, like, I would be curious to call Kuminga's bluff. Like, I doubt Jonathan Kuminga actually wants to sign for $7.9 million. Not only does he forego $14 extra million this upcoming season, but there's no guarantee that he gets a $24 million contract in 2026, 2027. There's absolutely no guarantee. And when you're paying a guy $7.9 million, well, you don't feel as inclined to play him a big enough role that would earn him that type of contract. So I think Kuminga would be digging himself a pretty deep hole by making this move, but the threat is out there, and Golden State has at least a little bit of pressure on them now. I'd be curious and would wonder if Golden State's going to end up calling Kuminga's bluff, and he'll end up just folding when it gets close to the October 1st deadline. Now, Jake Fischer did say this as well. He said that the sides remain locked in a staring contest that some well-placed observers believe could drag into September at this rate. That's kind of where I'm at as well. I don't see any resolution coming here in the next 2 weeks. There's been no movement in the last 2 weeks, and I can't imagine them getting all the way to the finish line here in the next 10 business days. So it's looking like this is going to drag into September and could go all the way up to that week leading up to October 1st, and where Kuminga has to make a decision whether or not it's the qualifying offer or he ends up, succumbing to what Golden State is demanding and waiving that no trade clause on the 1+1 deal. The only thing I know for certain is that we have this Kuminga saga covered like nobody else on YouTube. We cover every single quote, every single rumor, every update, every Instagram story, every tweet that comes out about this whole situation. We have you guys covered. Even if it leads to nowhere, I just want you guys to be tapped in. I want you guys to be educated with this entire Kuminga saga because it's the biggest Warriors story in really what could be the next 5 years. So lock us in, hit that subscribe button, turn your notifications on, and join 97,000 diehard Dub Nation fans. Next, we got a new wrinkle in the Kuminga story, something we have yet to talk about on this program. An NBA insider that we just previously mentioned has the latest on maybe a sign and trade partner. If things get really, really weird, could we see this end up going down? We'll tell you what it is in just a moment. But first, I have an awesome deal for you guys over at this link right here, chatsports.com/dubcity, if you want to get a dripped out long sleeve from your Golden State Warriors. I love this color scheme that they ran with the City Edition uniforms this past year, and you guys can get this for an awesome, awesome deal. It used to be $50. Now it's $35 at this link right here, chatsports.com/dubcity. That's chatsports.com/DUBSCITY. Get it at that link, and it's in the comment section. It's in the description. Click it. It takes you right to this page, and you get a discounted Warriors drippy long sleeve right here. All right. This is a little bit of exposition before we get into the meat and potatoes of what I was getting at here with a new wrinkle. So Jake Fischer says this: as much as the Warriors want a 2-year deal on their terms, seeing Kuminga go to the qualifying route would not be a welcome outcome. Golden State would then not only face the risk of losing Kuminga without compensation next summer, but also lose the ability to potentially shop him in February as a valuable trade asset with a salary north of $20 million. Depending on how much the Bulls manage their roster in coming months, they could have massive cap space to potentially mount a Kuminga pursuit come next June 30th if he plays things out in all the way to unrestricted free agency. Now, the Bulls, we're going to talk about them in just a moment. But the reason that Golden State's really cutting off all sign and trade options is because any return that they would get would be more than they are able to take back by just sending out Jonathan Kuminga. The holdup for Golden State is that they won't want to trade Buddy Hield or Moses Moody. Moody, a player who down the stretch of last season was in that starting lineup when Jimmy Butler was traded for, and he played really, really well for a big, big stretch. Honestly, kind of fell apart in the postseason, but he's an off-the-bench guy at the end of the day. Buddy Hield had a monster Game 7 against Houston. I mean, how do you let him go? And he's been such a vital member of this locker room and acclimating Jimmy Butler and being a friend to him, as well as Steph Curry. It's tough to give up a guy like that who's making less than $10 million. But let's just go back to what Fischer was saying here on Kuminga and the Bulls. He said that the Warriors' refusal to entertain the prospect of surrendering Hield and Moody in those circumstances are among the prime reasons that it's difficult to envision Golden State and Chicago ever finding common ground on a sign-and-trade construction that features Kuminga and Giddey switching teams. It's the first we're hearing about a potential Josh Giddey and Golden State relationship here. He said, but Golden State's interest in Giddey is genuine. The Warriors were prepared to select Giddey with the 7th overall pick back in 2021, only for OKC to choose Giddey and steer the Warriors towards selecting Kuminga at 7. It's believed that both the Thunder and Warriors had Giddey and Kuminga projected as the players to go 6th and 7th in some order entering that draft. I'm told that the Warriors continue to value Giddey's skill set and have communicated their interest in the Australian point guard's representation. There simply does not appear, though, to be a feasible pathway to such a trade. Not right now. The base year compensation issue alone makes it challenging before we even get to the limited salary matching and outgoing player flexibility that Golden State is currently facing. Yeah, Golden State's not a taxpayer yet, but it's not easy for them to make a bunch of trades considering the contracts that they have and how valuable some of those guys are to them. Now, the whole gist of that long-winded quote from Jake Fischer is that I think if the Warriors had the choice to swap Kuminga and Giddey, they would, but it's just not that easy at this point in time. So it doesn't look like Josh Giddey will be a Warrior anytime soon. Could he be down the line when both these guys get their contracts sorted out? Potentially, but I don't know. A midseason trade, Kuminga for Giddey, I don't even know how much that would get the juices flowing for me, but things I know about Josh Giddey: can pass, can dribble, and can finish at the rim. Struggles as a shooter, struggles as a defender, but as far as being a guy who has the ball in his hands, it could alleviate some pressure off of Steph. I wouldn't mind adding him to the roster, but to trade straight up for Kuminga, I probably pass. I would rather have Kobe White, somebody who could score the rock a little bit better. Now, before we get out of here, I have one more quote from Anthony Slater here about Al Horford and his current status with Golden State. For those of you who decided to wait as long as you did and watch the show all the way until the end, this is for you. He said, Horford is comfortable waiting. Retirement remains on the table per sources, though the Warriors appear to be operating as if he is a firm part of their plan next season. And look, I'll just say this before we get out of here. If Al Horford retires, the whole front office should just resign. They should be forced to resign. The board, the trustees, whoever's sitting at a long table that makes Golden State the Warriors decisions, they should just fire the entire front office, because that would not only have Jonathan Kuminga holding them hostage, and then they get played a fool by their top free agent target. So that would just be an absolute doomsday scenario, more so, I think, than Kuminga even signing that qualifying offer. The whole front office should resign in embarrassment and disgust if the Warriors can't secure Al Horford after getting the Kuminga stuff done. But that's all I have for you on today's edition of Warriors Today by Chat Sports. I'll stop the shit talking. I'll stop the ranting for just a little bit, but it continues again tomorrow. So lock us in, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys all in the next one. And as always, let's go Dubs.